All right, and we're back with another lesson on the law. And this week's lesson is titled Temporary Property Rights. And the Bible is clear on ownership and property rights. But it's all temporary since you can only hold on to the physical while you are alive. Once you're gone, so is your ability to own things. Now, of course, you can still have the right to pass things on to your family and generations to come. And if you think about it, though, property rights and all of that is actually in contrast to socialism, where everything is redistributed. And you could kind of think of things as communal, that what's yours is mine and mine is yours, especially the money, because that's the main thing that's redistributed. And I would say that is also known as theft, but in disguise of good intentions. Now, another thing is this kind of concept is in disagreement with is communism, where the government owns everything, and you're basically leasing it from the government. And you might be thinking, what is today's lesson is about? But when you hear property rights and ownership, it should be clear that the topic will be on stealing. And the whole idea of theft, though, wouldn't be possible unless you have the right to own property, since it wouldn't even be yours to begin with if you couldn't steal, So if it's not yours to begin with, like in socialism, then it can't be stolen in a sense. You're only using it because it's communal. So, on that note, this lesson will probably be pretty quick, not too much to talk, pretty straightforward. Thou shalt not steal, there's the list, and here's the verse. Exodus 20:15, you shall not steal. But you got to go back. Whose is it anyways? If you really think about it, let's see what Exodus says. Now, therefore, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, then you shall be a special treasure to me above all people, for all the earth is mine. This is God basically saying the real owner is him. He's the one who created everything, therefore, it's his. Another verse kind of backing up the same thing is Exodus 9:29, saying, So Moses said to him, As soon as I have gone out of the city, I will spread out my hand to the Lord, and thunder will cease, and there will be no more hail, that you may know that the earth is the Lord's. So part of the purpose of the plagues were to demonstrate that God owned everything and is in control, and Pharaoh did not understand that. He was trying to be in control and tried to or he thought he owned everything, but he didn't, and so he had to be taught this. Another verse, though, in Psalms is the earth is the Lord's and all its fullness, the world and those who dwell therein. So God created everything, therefore everything is his also, and that includes you as a person. You are his. He created you, so you are his possession. Another verse is Haggai, the silver is mine and the gold is mine, declares the Lord of hosts. That includes your money and income. People really don't think about that one too much, but in reality, God has just given you a job, he's given you a career, an income, and all of that is his in a sense. You're just using it. I know a lot of people don't like to think of it that way because, everyone wants to think of their money as theirs and they get to decide what to do with it. Now, stealing is an act against God, though, if you really think about it. In Leviticus, it says, if a person sins and commits a trespass against the Lord by lying to his neighbor about what was delivered to him for safekeeping, or about a pledge, or about robbery, or if he has extorted from his neighbor, and he shall bring his trespass offering to the Lord. So the priest shall make atonement for him before the Lord, and he shall be forgiven for any one of these things that may have done in which he trespasses. And so God gives us everything, and we are to take care of them, you could say. And to not is, as if these were being stolen, that's robbery and extorted, are trespasses against God. So there are different types of stealing, of course, and we'll go out through the outlined, or the ones mentioned in the Bible that I could find that correlate to the topic. So the first one I found was in Deuteronomy. You shall not remove your neighbor's landmark, which the men of old have set in your inheritance, which you will inherit the land that the Lord your God is given to you to possess. So property lines are something people still argue over today. And if someone is actually lying about where their land starts or ends, then he is stealing the land that is not his. Now, I would say that this isn't too common amongst city because the property lines are kind of already set in stone and already have fences kind of on the walls or kind of sanctioning where their one property line starts and the other ends. It kind of gets more into complicated territory is when you're more in rural areas where you see these massive fences just going on and on. That's where people could be accidentally or intentionally putting fences where they shouldn't be. And so that's where you could be stealing land. Now, another of the verses, Deuteronomy, is if a man steals an ox or a sheep and slaughters it or sells it, he shall restore 5 oxen for an ox and 4 sheep for a sheep. If the theft is certainly found alive in his hands, whether it is an ox or a donkey or a sheep, he shall restore double. So the verse is what would be looked at for punishment or for any form of stealing. And it outlines 4 to 5 times the original value of the item stolen if it is destroyed and irreplaceable. While if the item is able to be returned, then double was to be given. So it is, all of this is to show a repentant heart and you're not going to do it again. Now, the interesting thing, if you think about it, is the story that a lot of people talk about in the New Testament for stealing is the story of Zacchaeus, the tax collector, and he gave back 4 times the money that, supposedly he stole from people. And everyone was like, wow, he didn't have to do that. He should have just, gave back the original amount. But if you look at this verse, he knew his Bible. He's like, okay, the appropriate response to this is to give back 4 times. Some could argue that maybe it was double, but the thing is, since he already stole money from people that, in a sense, they've lost more than just the money that he stole now, because the people could have used the money to buy stuff and then make money off of that money. And there's a lot of things going on there that could have been done with the potential of money that is no longer. And so that's why it makes more sense to give that 4 times. And so it's just an interesting trivia tidbit there that people don't realize, but really Zacchaeus was following the law there. Now, in Deuteronomy, it says, you shall not have in your bag differing weights, a heavy and a light. You shall not have in your house differing measures, a large and a small. You shall have a perfect and just weight, a perfect and just measure, that your days may be lengthened in the land which the Lord your God is giving you. So, to use differing weights were used in trade and businesses. That's what this verse is talking about. When you buy something, you'd use weights. When you sell something, you use weights. To weigh your money, in a sense. If you were buying something with gold, they would weigh the gold to see how much value that is worth. And so all of that is saying that if you're not using appropriate weights, you're stealing what is appropriate value, in a sense. And to give an example, if you go to a store and you buy a pound of flour or whatever, a meat for a pound, and it says $6 for that. When you go home, you expect the pound to be a pound, but if you go home and it's only a half a pound, you've just been ripped off and they've stolen, in a sense, your money. Now, there's other examples at my work, that I work at UPS, that it has the weight on the boxes that it's supposed to say, and you're generally charged for how much packages weigh. And sometimes you'll get like a very small package that just is obviously mismarked for the weight that it's like, no way, there's no way that this is that heavy. But at the same time, sometimes it's the exact opposite, that it's like super heavy and it's like, no, there's no way that's 10 pounds. That's way heavier. And so I'm actually not sure who really makes those mistakes, and if it's intentional or not. Sometimes it can just be mismarked. But a lot of times, if a company is consistently doing that, because they can be making extra money when they shouldn't be, they're stealing from the customer. So this is really a verse about not using appropriate business practices. Now, another verse is in Deuteronomy 24:7. If a man is found kidnapping any of his brethren of the children of Israel and mistreats him or sells him, then that kidnapper shall die, and you shall put away the evil from among you. So one of the most prevalent ways people still kidnap today are in other countries for sex slaves or for other forms of slavery. And in this, that it's saying that, you're kidnapping, that it requires the death penalty. It's very interesting. But yeah, so another verse is in Malachi 3:8-9. Will a man rob God? Yet you have robbed me. But you say, in what ways have you robbed you? In tithe and offering you are cursed with a curse, for you have robbed me, even this whole nation. So God considered the neglect to tithe theft. I was thinking about kind of an example of this, since God actually, remember, he owns everything, including your income. It would kind of be like similar if you were to take a friend out to dinner or lunch or whatever, and you buy him his food, and he orders something different than you, and you're like, okay, well, I want to know what that tastes like, or if it's good or not. Can I get a bite? And he says, no. You'd be kind of like, wow, that's a bit rude. I just bought you your entire meal, and you're not even willing to give me a bite or a piece. So that's kind of the same way that God gave us everything we have, and we're not willing, or at least some of us are not willing, to give back to God. Now, there are a lot of people who say, well, the New Testament really doesn't talk about that we have to tithe. But the interesting thing is, there's a passage in Matthew that says, and he said to them, render therefore to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. When they had heard these words, they marveled and left him and went their way. And a lot of people bring up this verse, obviously, to talk about taxes, that you kind of are required to pay your taxes, which is true. But they forget to point out this verse. It says, and to God the things that are God. So it assumes that you already are, in a sense, tithing on top of the tax that you're supposed to be doing, in a sense. Now, the question is, what can you tithe to? I know there's a lot of debate what you can and cannot do, and really the thing is, the easiest thing, tithe to the church you attend. If you think that maybe the money is being, I would say, mismanaged or not, then give to any place that really is the purpose that furthers the gospel. I know I've given to Samaritan's Purse, that they do a lot of gospel work. They're presenting the gospel to people. They're also doing a lot of surgeries for cleft lips and digging of wells and schools, and just they're doing a lot of good things. And so I really like to give my tithe money to an organization like that. Now, you can also, I've heard people, say if like men's retreats or children's retreats during the summer, that they, donate some money there to help them go to camp. And that definitely is good too, because the purpose of those camps are to present the gospel and or further their spiritual walk, and those are all good things. And so those are really good places to put your money. And so you still, though, kind of assume that you do tithe. Another verse is in Deuteronomy 24:14-15. It says, you shall not oppress a hired servant who is poor and needy, whether one of your brethren or one of the aliens who is in your land, within your gates. Each day you shall give him his wages, and not let the sun go down on it. For he is poor and has set his heart on it, lest he cry out against you to the Lord, and it be sin against you. So this verse is basically saying, don't make late payments, in a sense, whether it to be to your employees that you're hiring or someone that's, doing a job for you. Don't just be like, oh, I don't have, I'll pay you tomorrow, and I'll pay you the next day, and just go on and never pay him. He did the job. He deserves money, and he kind of needs it. It seems in this situation, since he is poor, so he's very reliant on it. Now, this also you could say, concept go towards loans. Don't make late payments on that. If you have a loan, whether it be a house loan, a car loan, or any other type of loan that you're doing, you should pay them on time, since you made the agreement. It's a contract. So kind of in summary, with all of those outlined, and those are only some, you could talk about different types of stealing all day. So we went over land, and that one's kind of the age-old one that people have always argued over, who owns land. Property, as in ownership in anything you own, could be, a phone, a car, a computer, anything you consider that you own, kind of general property stealing. There's also business practices. Remember, we talked about that with mismatching of weights, not being correct in that. Now, there was other business practices you could say as an employee. A lot of people talk about stealing company time. I know that since I'm a supervisor, I see this a little bit more so, that some employees take a lot of restroom breaks. And I remember going, and this is kind of related, that, in school, your teachers would always tell you, schedule your bathroom breaks between classes. You got time to go in between them. And the same thing is at work, in a sense. If you're working, a 4-hour job, 10 or 8-hour job, depending whatever it is, you have breaks that they give you. We're kind of mandatory to give you them. So go to the restroom then, or go to the restroom before or after work. A lot of times, you're paid by the hour, and so every minute that you aren't working is very important to the company. And that's where, when some employees, go take 20-minute bathroom breaks, it's like, what are you doing? You're doing this intentionally not to work. And so you're really stealing company time. Especially, I heard this one story just recently, the past week. A driver was telling me that there's this one employee that literally, after he finished work, he would go into the break room and take a 1 to 2 hour nap every day before clocking out. And so that was, they talked to him. They said, you need to straighten up. And he never did. And I think he actually eventually got fired, is what I was told. But that's, obviously the extreme case. I don't think really anyone's doing that. But there is those ones that are like taking as many bathroom breaks as you can, or other employees that I've known that they just like, if you tell them to do something, they will go as slow as possible, or talk to every other coworker they have on the way there. There's many ways that can be done. But so there's a lot of business practices you could think of for stealing, the concept of stealing. Now, I'd say we went over the kidnapping one. That was kind of one that you can steal people, you could say. And then the act of tithing, the lack thereof, is a theft to God, since he required tithe, and this is his money anyways. And then lastly, timely payments, loans and or employees, that you pay them appropriately. Because if you don't pay them appropriately, then you're stealing their time, in a sense, in the exact opposite. I just went over with the business practices. Now, we also went over the different ways of repercussions there would be, and these outline ones on the side are actually including some verses I did not bring up, just for time's sake and just kind of for easy reading. That, we said 4 to 5 times payment if the item is no longer in possession. You can't, restore it. Now, if you're caught in the act of stealing, then you restore double. If you're just in confession, it says 120%. And if it's an accident, you honestly did not mean to steal it. Maybe you accidentally grabbed something and it just kind of got in your car. I don't know. There are many situations that could be accidental. Just return it. There's no penalty there if it was an accident. Now, what if the case that the person you've stolen from is dead? Well, restore it to the family. Now, if he has no family at all either, and he's just completely their family and person is dead, give it to the church, in a sense, the priest. And so some people do that. that if they've stolen and there's no way to restore the item and the people are not there to give or return the item to or cost, then, make an extra tithe, almost saying this is my penalty to God, saying, well, I couldn't make restitution to the person. I'll make my restitution to God and hope that, this money gets used appropriately or in a better way, Now, as I said, there are many other concepts of stealing, but these are the ones that I think were just outlined in the Bible that I could find. And you kind of have to take these concepts and you can apply them today's life, day-to-day life. How are you stealing? Is it in work? Is it in buying? Another one that kind of brought up is with stealing if you were to use fake money. Obviously, I don't think too many people are trying to do that, but if you're using that, you're trying to steal something. Now, another verse, going back to a final verse, is in Ephesians 4:28. Let him who stole steal no longer, but rather let him labor, working with his hands what is good, that he may have something to give him who has need. So, God is instructing those who steal, get a job simply, and be productive people in society and give back to the community. And so this verse is not telling them to say, well, if you're a thief, well, just continue to be a freeloader, living off of redistributed wealth. And this is kind of like a little kind of thing saying that, socialism, I know that there are certain people or certain denominations or Christians out there that do think that socialism is truly biblical, and they argue that it's for the greater good. But the thing is, since God does say that theft is wrong and that you do have the right to own something, then therefore socialism that is taking something that is not yours and giving it to someone poorer, supposedly, then that is theft. And the thing is, we need to learn the final kind of takeaway, the underlining principle is respect what God has given to others. And we must learn not to be greedy or selfish, thinking we deserve what others have and steal what is not ours. And we should be good stewards with what God has given us. Well, whatever it may be, maybe it be small or large, be good stewards of it. We can't just say, the 1%, they're making all the money and they just keep getting richer and richer. And it's like, well, that may be true, but that's not your money. God did decide to give it to them. And there's no reason to complain about someone else's stuff, in a sense. It's how God designed things, in a sense, at least in that way, that he ordained some to have some and some not to have stuff. And so you're really just showing that you're greedy and or selfish, thinking you deserve everything or things that everyone else has. And so I know that this lesson was real quick. I didn't think there was too many things to talk about to really go into too much depth. But thank you for listening in. Hopefully this time the audio was a little bit louder. I think I did notice that the last week's audio was a bit quiet and I couldn't figure out how to fix that. But thanks again, and hopefully see you guys next week.